Episode titled Mysterious Toy. It was a normal morning at the Pig family house. Mummy Pig was cooking breakfast, Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper, and Peppa and George were playing. Everything was as usual, but something strange happened that day. When Peppa woke up in the morning, she noticed something on her bed that hadn't been there before. A plush teddy bear. It was sitting on her pillow with wide, unblinking eyes staring at her. "Mummy, Daddy!" Peppa cried out. "Who left this bear on my bed?" Mummy Pig walked over and picked up the toy. "We didn't buy you a bear, Peppa," she said, sounding slightly surprised. "Maybe one of your friends left it here." But Peppa knew for sure that she hadn't seen this bear before. She felt an odd unease as the bear's eyes seemed to follow her every movement. Peppa tried to distract herself and keep playing with George, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the bear. Later that evening, as everyone was preparing to go to sleep, Peppa placed the bear on the floor beside her bed, deciding to leave it there so she wouldn't have to think about it. However, in the middle of the night, she woke up to a strange sound and saw that the bear was back on her pillow. Peppa froze. She had clearly seen her place it on the floor earlier. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself, trying to calm down. Maybe it was just a dream. But the next morning, the same thing happened. The bear was back on her pillow. The more Peppa tried to ignore it, the stranger things became. At night, she heard the toy rustling quietly, and its small plastic eyes seemed to glow brighter. Peppa constantly felt as if the bear was watching her. One night, when Peppa woke up, she saw the bear standing right beside her bed. It wasn't sitting like usual. It was standing, its paws stretched out in front of it, and its eyes staring at her with an expression as if it was ready to say something. Peppa screamed and jumped out of bed, but the bear remained in place. Peppa was terrified, but then she gathered her courage and decided to investigate. She got up and walked over to the bear. Its eyes were still gleaming, but now, as she got closer, she heard a faint whisper. "You don't have to be afraid of me." Peppa froze, her heart pounding in her chest. This couldn't just be a toy. It was something more. She ran out of the room and didn't return to the bear. From that moment on, she decided it was best to get rid of it. Peppa placed the bear in a box and left it outside, far away from the house. However, when she returned home the next morning, another surprise awaited her. The bear was standing by the door as if it had never left. Episode titled The Missing Daddy Pig. Everything in the Pig family's house seemed normal. Peppa was playing with George in the room until she noticed something strange about her dad. He seemed dim. At first, it wasn't very noticeable, just a slight feeling that something was off. But gradually, Daddy Pig began to look paler, almost as if he was fading. Peppa would look up to talk to him, but his figure seemed less distinct, like a shadow growing dimmer. At first, Peppa thought it was just her imagination, but it happened more and more. Daddy Pig began speaking more softly, and his movements slowed down as if he was becoming part of the air around him. Peppa decided to ask Mummy Pig, but when she went into the living room, Daddy Pig was gone. Looking out the window, she saw his figure in the backyard, but only as a shadow standing by the tree. He wasn't moving. His eyes were empty. Peppa went closer, but as soon as she reached him, Daddy Pig vanished into the air as if he had never been there. Every day, his disappearance became more noticeable. His clothes grew duller, his voice became weaker, and one day he simply vanished. Peppa couldn't understand what was happening. She turned to George and Mummy Pig, but no one could explain why Daddy Pig was disappearing. A week passed, and Peppa began to notice that not only was Daddy Pig vanishing, but his traces were disappearing too. The items he used to touch were becoming invisible, vanishing as if they had never existed. Even his photos on the walls began to fade, and his favorite toys turned into shadows. One evening, Peppa decided to find out where her dad was going. She woke up in the middle of the night and saw Daddy Pig sitting in his chair, but his face was invisible. He didn't even notice as Peppa quietly approached him. She screamed, and he instantly disappeared into the darkness. From that day, Peppa stopped searching for Daddy Pig, but she still felt his presence. The shadow that never disappeared stayed with her. And every time she asked for help, something vanished. Everything disappeared. It starts like a completely normal morning. The sun is shining through the window. Peppa walks downstairs. Mummy Pig is making breakfast. George is pushing his dinosaur across the floor. And Daddy Pig is sitting at the table reading his newspaper. He looks up and says, "Good morning, Peppa." But right away, Peppa feels that something isn't right. Her dad's voice sounds slightly quieter and more even than usual, without his normal, cheerful tone. He laughs at something in the newspaper, but the laugh sounds strange. Too identical, with no pauses, no breathing, almost like a recording playing. The whole day seems calm, but Peppa starts noticing small things. Daddy doesn't get out of breath on the hill. He doesn't mix up the map. He doesn't trip or fall into a muddy puddle like he normally would. He does everything correctly, too correctly. Even when George spills his juice, Daddy doesn't react the way he usually does. He just says, "That's fine," in a flat voice. His face stays calm. When Peppa tells him an old joke that always made him laugh the loudest, he simply smiles and says, "That is funny." But he doesn't laugh, and his eyes don't change, like there's no real happiness behind them. Peppa decides to test him again. At dinner, she sits in Daddy's usual chair on purpose. Normally, he would notice and joke about it, but he just stands there for a moment, as if he doesn't understand something is different. Then he slowly sits in another chair and continues eating. No joke, no smile. That night, Peppa wakes up because of a quiet knocking sound. Knock, knock, knock. At first, she thinks it's the wind, but it happens again. She walks into the hallway and sees the kitchen light on. Daddy is standing by the wall staring at one spot. He isn't moving. He isn't blinking. "Daddy," Peppa whispers. He slowly turns his head and says, "I am here, Peppa." He smiles, but his eyes look empty. "Why aren't you sleeping?" she asks. "I don't get tired," he replies, and the sentence sounds just as flat as it did that morning. In the morning, everything looks normal again. Daddy laughs loudly, complains that he's tired, breathes heavily after climbing the stairs. But Peppa doesn't believe it. She starts asking questions. "Daddy, remember when we got stuck in the elevator?" she asks. "Of course," he answers without hesitation. "Where was that?" He pauses for a second. "In the elevator," he says, and it sounds wrong, like he isn't remembering, just repeating the word. Later that day, Peppa notices the basement door is slightly open. It's usually locked, and from downstairs, she hears the knocking again. "Knock, knock," she asks Mummy, but Mummy calmly says, "Daddy is upstairs and everything is fine." Peppa knows that isn't true. She carefully opens the door and walks down the dark stairs. The basement feels cold and quiet. The knocking gets louder. In the corner, there is a large wooden box. From inside, someone whispers, "Peppa!" It's her real dad's voice, weak and scared. "Peppa, that's not me upstairs." Peppa spins around. At the top of the stairs stands the new dad. He looks down at her and smiles that same even smile. "I have always been here," he says calmly. His voice now sounds deeper and colder. The lights begin to flicker. The real daddy knocks again from inside the box, asking for help. Peppa quickly grabs a key lying nearby and unlocks it. The real daddy climbs out of breath, dirty, shaking. The new dad slowly steps down one stair and says quietly, "There is only room for one dad in this house." The episode was called The Door That Appears at Night. It was a normal morning. Peppa woke up and went downstairs. In the kitchen, Mummy Pig was making breakfast, Daddy Pig was reading his newspaper, and George was playing with his dinosaur. Everything was calm and usual. After breakfast, Peppa and George went upstairs to play in their room. They were walking down the hallway when Peppa suddenly noticed a door that had not been there before. It was between the bathroom and their parents' bedroom. The door looked completely normal, white with a round handle, but Peppa could not remember seeing it before. She stopped and looked at it. "George, have we seen this door before?" Peppa asked. George looked at it and shook his head. Peppa carefully opened the door. Inside, there was a room. It was almost empty. There was a small table and a box of toys. Peppa walked closer and opened the box. Inside, there were toys. There was a doll, a ball, and a green dinosaur exactly like George's. Peppa looked at George. George was holding his dinosaur in his hands. Peppa picked up the second dinosaur. It felt cold and a little heavier than usual. She put it back. They left the room and closed the door. Peppa decided to tell their parents. Downstairs, she said that they had found a new room. Mummy Pig smiled and said there was no new room in the house. Daddy Pig went upstairs to check. Peppa and George followed him. They reached the place, but there was just a normal wall with wallpaper. There was no door. Peppa stayed quiet. She did not argue. In the evening, she was playing in her room. Among her toys, there was the dinosaur she had seen in that room. She did not remember bringing it. That night, Peppa woke up. The house was quiet. She walked into the hallway and looked at the place where the wall had been. The door was there again. It was slightly open. There was no sound coming from inside. Peppa stood and looked at it. It felt like someone was inside. She did not go in. She slowly closed the door and went back to her room. In the morning, everything looked normal again. But now, Peppa knew that the door appeared only when no one was expecting it. The episode begins calmly. An ordinary day. Peppa and George are playing in the living room. Daddy Pig is putting together a shelf, and Mummy Pig is cooking lunch. Everything is bright and sunny, and the usual cheerful music plays. Nothing feels strange. Peppa runs down the hallway and suddenly stops. In the wall, between the staircase and her parents' bedroom, there is a small red door. It wasn't there before. It's neat, slightly smaller than a normal door, with a round golden handle. "Mummy, what is that door?" Peppa asks. Mummy looks out from the kitchen. "What door, Peppa?" When Mummy walks closer, the door is gone. Just an ordinary wall. Peppa blinks. She takes a step back, and the door appears again. Bright red. Peppa carefully touches the handle. The door opens without a sound. Behind it, there is no darkness. There is another hallway. It looks like their house, but cleaner, brighter, quieter. Peppa steps inside. The music disappears. In front of her is the living room. Daddy Pig is sitting at the table. Mummy Pig is smiling. George is playing. Everything looks the same, but too perfect. Nothing is out of place. Not a single toy is messy. "Hello, Peppa," Mummy says. "Today we will do anything you want," Daddy Pig adds. Peppa smiles. "Really?" "Of course, Peppa," Mummy replies. "You are always right." Peppa suggests jumping in muddy puddles inside the house. "Wonderful idea," Daddy Pig says calmly, but no one laughs. They jump, but there is no joyful sound. Their faces are smiling, but there is no laughter. Peppa begins to feel something is wrong. "Let's eat cake for breakfast." "Wonderful idea," Mummy replies again. "You are always right, Peppa." Their voices are soft, too soft, almost empty. Peppa looks at George. "George, roar!" George opens his mouth. Silence. He moves the dinosaur, but it makes no sound. In this world, there is no laughter, no noise, no disagreement, only agreement. Peppa walks to the window. Outside is the green hill, but the sky is still. The clouds do not move. Birds are frozen in the air. What if I say the sky is green? Peppa asks. The sky is green, Mummy calmly repeats. You are always right, Peppa. Peppa feels a wave of unease. What if I say you're not my parents? Daddy and Mummy continue smiling. We are whatever you want us to be. Their smiles slowly widen, but their eyes do not change. Peppa steps back. I want to go home. This is home, Mummy replies. You can stay here forever. No one argues here. Everything is perfect. Peppa suddenly realizes that no one has laughed even once. She runs back toward the hallway. The red door is still open. Before stepping through, she turns around. They are all standing in the same places, smiling, not blinking. Peppa runs back into her real house. The music returns. The colors feel warmer. In the hallway, there is only a normal wall. The red door is gone. Peppa sighs in relief. It was just a dream, she says. But on the wall, a small red handle remains. Neat, perfect. Peppa slowly touches it, and in that moment, the door appears again, but this time it is already closed. From the inside, someone slowly turns the handle and gently shuts it completely. From the other side, the music abruptly cuts off. The final shot shows the normal hallway of the pig family's house, but a faint red outline of a door is still visible on the wall, and it feels like someone is quietly waiting behind it. The episode was called The New House. It begins in the morning as the pig family moves into their new home. The house is big, bright, and a little unfamiliar. Peppa, George, Mummy Pig, and Daddy Pig walk inside and start looking around the rooms. Daddy Pig happily says that the house has plenty of space for playing, and Mummy Pig smiles and says that now everyone will have more room. George immediately runs down the hallway with his dinosaur and happily says, "Dinosaur!" Peppa is excited at first too, but she feels that the house is a little too quiet. While Mummy and Daddy unpack boxes, Peppa decides to explore the house. She walks down a long hallway and looks at the doors to different rooms. The house is very quiet, and the only sound she hears is her own footsteps. Suddenly, somewhere upstairs, she hears a small noise. Creak. Peppa stops and listens. She looks up at the staircase. "Mummy?" Peppa asks quietly. But nobody answers. From the kitchen, she can hear the normal sound of dishes. Peppa slowly walks up the stairs to the second floor. There are several rooms. She looks into one room. It's empty. She looks into another. Also empty. Then suddenly, she hears another sound. Tap. It sounds like someone gently knocked on the wall. Peppa frowns a little. Maybe it's just the house, she says to herself. She walks farther down the hallway. At the end of the hallway, there is a small window. Outside, the wind is gently moving the branches of a tree. When the branches touch the wall, they make a soft sound. Tap, tap. Peppa looks at the branches. "Oh, it's the tree," she says. But just as she is about to leave, she hears another creak, this time from downstairs. Peppa quickly walks down the stairs. George is sitting on the floor playing with his dinosaur. "George, did you hear that noise?" Peppa asks. George looks up. "Noise?" "Yes, like someone walking." George looks around and says, "Dinosaur?" Peppa smiles, but she still feels a little strange. Later in the evening, Peppa walks through the hallway again. The house is darker now, and the windows reflect the light from the lamps. Once again, she hears a quiet sound. Creak. Peppa stops. "Who's there?" she asks softly. Just then, Daddy Pig walks out of a room. "Peppa, what's the matter?" he asks. Peppa looks a little embarrassed. "I think someone is in the house. I keep hearing strange sounds." Daddy Pig smiles and explains calmly. "In new houses, floors, walls, and doors sometimes creak. The house is just getting used to its new family." Mummy Pig walks over and adds, "Sometimes the wind moves branches or windows. Those are normal sounds." Peppa starts to relax. "So it's just the house?" Daddy Pig laughs. Of course! Sometimes our imagination makes sounds seem scarier than they really are. Peppa looks around the hallway and slowly nods. I guess it's just imagination. But when the family walks back into the living room, the camera stays in the empty hallway for a moment. A quiet creak can be heard again. The episode ends with Peppa looking back at the hallway and quietly saying, I guess it's just imagination. But she still looks a little unsure.